On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple Inc. and a defining visionary of the digital age, died on October 5, 2011 at the age of 56. His death was the result of complications from a rare form of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, a cancer he had battled privately for nearly a decade. Though natural in cause, his passing symbolized the human cost of relentless innovation, ambition, and the pursuit of perfection that shaped both his life and the modern technological world. Jobs' illness was first diagnosed in 2003, yet he initially resisted conventional medical treatment, opting for alternative therapies before eventually undergoing surgery. This decision reflected not only his personal belief in intuition over conformity, but also the broader cultural tension between technology's promise and the limits of human control. Despite his failing health, he continued to lead Apple through its most transformative years, overseeing the launches of the iPhone, iPad, and MacBook, devices that fundamentally changed how people communicate and live. When Jobs passed away, the world reacted with an outpouring of grief seldom seen for a corporate figure. Apple stores became spontaneous memorials, their glass walls lined with flowers, candles, and messages of gratitude. His death came just a day after the release of the iPhone 4S, underscoring his lasting impact on global innovation. The immediate consequence of his passing was a collective sense of uncertainty. Could Apple, or technology itself, ever be the same without him? Investors, analysts, and consumers alike questioned whether his singular vision could be replicated. Yet in the years that followed, his legend only grew, cementing Jobs as the archetype of the modern genius: brilliant, exacting, and uncompromising. Jobs' death and legacy reveal humanity's enduring struggle with mortality and meaning in an era defined by progress. His life was a paradox, an individual obsessed with creating machines that felt human, yet ultimately subject to the same frailties as any person. In remembering him, society has elevated his image into a modern myth, the rebel inventor who changed the world and paid the ultimate price. Through films, biographies, and museum exhibitions, Steve Jobs is immortalized not only as a businessman, but as a cultural force who redefined the intersection of technology and humanity. His death reminds us that even in an age of innovation, mortality remains the one boundary no invention can transcend. But through legacy, one can still shape the future long after life ends. Rodney Dangerfield, the king of self-deprecating humor and one of America's most beloved comedians, died on October 5, 2004, at the age of 82. His death was caused by complications following heart valve replacement surgery, a natural but tragic conclusion to a life spent turning hardship into laughter. His passing marked the end of an era when stand-up comedy thrived on wit, vulnerability, and the ability to find humor in personal pain. Dangerfield's health had been declining for years. Before surgery, he famously joked to reporters, "When I woke up after the operation, there was a nurse standing over me saying, 'You'll pull through, Mr. Dangerfield, no respect.'" That line, echoing his trademark catchphrase, "I don't get no respect," reflected not only his comedic genius, but also the spirit of his generation, one that used humor as a form of resilience. In an era shaped by post-war anxiety and social change, his comedy resonated with audiences who related to the feeling of being overlooked, unappreciated, or simply trying to get by. The immediate reaction to his death was a mix of sorrow and celebration. Fellow comedians from Jay Leno to Jim Carrey paid tribute to his influence on modern comedy. Dangerfield had helped bridge the gap between old-school vaudeville humor and the emerging self-aware comedy of the late 20th century. His death was not just the loss of a performer. It symbolized the fading of a particular comedic era, one rooted in honesty, struggle, and the ability to laugh through life's chaos. His passing amplified his legend. In death, Dangerfield became more than a comedian. He became an icon of perseverance. His story, from a struggling salesman to a late-blooming comedy star, embodied the American ideal of reinvention. Hollywood immortalized his image through films like Caddyshack and Back to School, ensuring that new generations would continue to discover his humor. Rodney Dangerfield's death reminds us how laughter can outlive mortality. Comedy, in his hands, became both shield and mirror, reflecting the human condition with honesty and absurdity. Through film tributes, comedic homages, and the continued echo of his famous line, society honors him not just for his jokes, but for the truth beneath them. That humor is one of humanity's greatest defenses against the inevitability of death and the longing for respect that binds us all. Chantal Akerman, one of cinema's most daring and influential auteurs, passed away on October 5, 2015, at the age of 65. Her death, ruled a suicide, followed a long struggle with depression, an echo of the personal and artistic intensity that defined her life and work. Known for breaking boundaries in narrative structure, time, and female subjectivity, Akerman's passing was not merely the loss of a filmmaker, but the silencing of a voice that had consistently challenged the conventions of cinema and the cultural norms of her era. Her suicide came shortly after the death of her mother, Natalia Akerman, a Holocaust survivor whose experiences profoundly shaped Chantal's artistic vision. Much of her work, especially her masterpiece Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Brussels, 1975, reflected themes of domestic confinement, repetition, and emotional isolation. These elements mirrored both the feminist awakening of the 1970s and the lingering trauma of post-war Europe. Her death, therefore, felt tragically intertwined with the very issues she explored: the struggle for meaning, identity, and connection in an increasingly fragmented world. The immediate aftermath of her passing saw an outpouring of tributes from the international film community. Critics and directors alike, from Agnes Varda to Todd Haynes, emphasized her unparalleled contribution to feminist and avant-garde cinema. Akerman's death intensified scholarly interest in her work, prompting retrospectives and academic studies that sought to contextualize her legacy within both feminist theory and modernist film history. Her passing served to amplify her legend, transforming her from a revered yet underappreciated artist into a posthumous icon of cinematic and emotional truth. In death, Akerman's influence only deepened. Her films, often minimalist and unsettlingly intimate, continue to inspire filmmakers to confront silence, time, and female experience without compromise. Through museum exhibitions, critical re-evaluations, and screenings of her restored works, Akerman is immortalized as a visionary who captured the stillness and pain of ordinary existence with unmatched honesty. Her death reminds us that art and mortality are often intertwined. Creativity can be both a refuge and a burden. In remembering Chantal Akerman, we confront humanity's ongoing dialogue with grief, solitude, and remembrance. We honor her not only through the preservation of her films, but through the continued pursuit of authenticity she demanded from all who follow in her path. Geoffrey Holder, a towering figure of charisma and creativity, passed away on October 5, 2014, at the age of 84 due to complications from pneumonia. His death marked the loss of one of the most versatile artists of the 20th century, a dancer, choreographer, actor, painter, and designer whose career defied boundaries of race and genre. Holder's passing was peaceful and natural, yet it echoed larger truths about the evolution of art, identity, and representation in his lifetime. Born in Trinidad, Holder rose to prominence during an era when Black artists faced systemic barriers to recognition in Western entertainment. His multifaceted career was a living rejection of limitation. He dazzled Broadway audiences in House of Flowers, choreographed the groundbreaking The Wiz, and gained cinematic immortality as the villain Baron Samedi in Live and Let Die, 1973. His distinctive deep voice and elegant physicality made him unforgettable, a symbol of grace and self-assured artistry. His death, coming at a time when discussions of diversity in the arts were regaining momentum, served as a poignant reminder of the pioneers who had quietly cleared the path for modern inclusivity. The immediate response to Holder's death was one of admiration and gratitude from across the artistic world. Tributes poured in from actors, dancers, and choreographers who cited him as a profound influence. His passing did not dim his light but instead amplified his legend. His name became shorthand for artistic fearlessness and cultural pride. In death, Holder's legacy was reframed within the context of the struggles and triumphs of Black artists across generations. Holder's life and death reflect an enduring truth about humanity's relationship with mortality and legacy, that art is a form of immortality. Through his vivid choreography, paintings, and performances, Holder transcended death's finality. He showed that creativity is not merely self-expression, but a dialogue with eternity. In commemorations, documentaries, and retrospectives, his influence continues to ripple outward, inspiring a new generation to embrace their identities with confidence and imagination. Ultimately, Geoffrey Holder's death reminds us that mortality need not silence brilliance. In celebrating his life, we are reminded that memory and art can conspire to keep the spirit not only alive, but radiant, echoing forever in the dance between creation and remembrance. Mary Leona Gage's life and death embody both the glamour and the fragility of fame. Born in 1939, she became a national sensation in 1957 when she was crowned Miss USA, only to lose her title days later after it was revealed that she was married and the mother of 2 children, violating the pageant's rules. Her sudden fall from grace mirrored the social constraints of 1950s America, when women were judged harshly for defying ideals of purity and domestic conformity. Gage's story, which began in the spotlight of triumph and scandal, ended quietly on October 5, 2010, when she died of heart failure at age 71 in Los Angeles. Her death was natural, yet it carried the weight of a life marked by public scrutiny and personal struggle. Gage's passing reflected the evolution of society's attitudes toward women, celebrity, and authenticity. In her youth, she had been punished for living a life that was later celebrated, balancing motherhood and ambition. Her fall from grace symbolized how mid-century America treated women who broke the mold, and her later years underscored the difficulty of escaping the shadow of early scandal. After her pageant days, Gage pursued acting and modeling, but fame eluded her. The media that once lifted her up had also been the instrument of her undoing, a tension that foreshadowed the challenges of later generations living under constant public judgment. The immediate aftermath of her death was subdued. There were no headlines or national tributes. Yet for those familiar with her story, her passing marked the end of a chapter in American cultural history. Over time, Gage's life has been re-examined with greater empathy, seen not as a cautionary tale but as a reflection of how fame, gender, and morality intertwined in the mid-20th century. Her death invites reflection on how society remembers those who fall short of perfection. In art and literature, figures like Gage endure because their humanity, marked by ambition, mistake, and resilience, mirrors our own. Through retrospectives and cultural commentary, her story reminds us that mortality is not just a biological end, but a reckoning with how we are seen and remembered. Mary Leona Gage's legacy, once marred by scandal, now stands as a testament to the enduring quest for authenticity in the face of judgment. Maurice Wilkins, a pioneering physicist and molecular biologist, passed away on October 5, 2004, at the age of 87 in London. His death was due to natural causes, closing the life of one of the key yet often understated figures in one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century, the discovery of the DNA double helix. Wilkins's passing marked the end of an era when the foundations of modern genetics were first laid, and his life and death reflected the values of his time: collaboration, discovery, and the quiet pursuit of truth in the shadow of controversy. Wilkins's contribution to the discovery of DNA's structure was crucial but historically overshadowed by the fame of James Watson and Francis Crick. As the assistant director of the biophysics unit at King's College London, Wilkins used X-ray diffraction techniques to examine DNA fibers, producing data that helped lead to the identification of its double helix shape. However, his relationship with colleague Rosalind Franklin was fraught with tension, and after her early death, questions arose about how her data had been shared. When Wilkins, Watson, and Crick were jointly awarded the Nobel Prize in 1962, it was both a celebration of scientific achievement and a reminder of the complexities of recognition in collaborative research. By the time of his death, Wilkins had largely withdrawn from the public eye, content to let his work speak for itself. His passing prompted a re-evaluation of his role in scientific history, inspiring renewed discussions about ethics, teamwork, and the nature of discovery. The immediate consequences of his death were subtle yet significant. Scientists and historians revisited his writings and lectures, appreciating his humility and lifelong dedication to promoting science for human betterment, particularly his later advocacy for nuclear disarmament and responsible science. Wilkins' death reminds us that history often remembers its heroes unevenly. His legacy continues in the countless genetic and biomedical advances that trace back to his contributions. Through books, documentaries, and academic retrospectives, Wilkins is now seen as a symbol of the quiet intellectual rigor that underpins great breakthroughs. His life and death together underscore humanity's enduring relationship with knowledge and memory. That true immortality lies not in fame, but in the discoveries that forever change how we understand ourselves and the world. Andrew Keir, the distinguished Scottish actor celebrated for his work on stage and screen, passed away at the age of 71. His death was due to natural, closing the life of a performer whose career spanned the golden era of British theatre and the evolving landscape of film and television. Keir's passing reflected a generation of actors who bridged classical stagecraft with the emerging opportunities of modern media, embodying the values of dedication, versatility, and subtle artistry. Keir's career was marked by a remarkable range, from Shakespearean roles to popular horror films. He gained widespread recognition for his performances in Hammer Films' horror productions, including Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and Quatermass, and The Pit, where his commanding presence and nuanced performances elevated genre cinema beyond simple thrills. On stage, he was known for his work with the Royal Shakespeare Company and other esteemed theatre troupes, demonstrating the discipline and rigor that characterized British theatre of the mid-20th century. His death signified the gradual passing of a generation that had shaped post-war British performance, leaving behind a legacy rooted in both classical and popular arts. The immediate consequences of Keir's death were primarily felt within the theatrical and cinematic communities, as colleagues and critics reflected on the breadth and quality of his work. While he may not have achieved household name status comparable to some contemporaries, his contributions amplified his legend within professional circles and among devoted fans, inspiring retrospectives and renewed appreciation for British horror and classical theatre. Keir's life and death reveal the nuanced ways in which society remembers artists. Mortality underscores the fragility of human achievement, yet memory persists through the enduring presence of recorded performances, critical essays, and continued screenings of his films. Commemoration through documentary features, stage revivals, and scholarly study allows his artistry to live on, illustrating humanity's desire to preserve cultural contributions that define eras, shape genres, and enrich collective memory. Andrew Keir's death reminds us that while life is finite, the impact of dedicated artistry endures, bridging generations and immortalizing talent in the cultural fabric of history. Hortense de Beauharnais, born in 1783, was a figure whose life bridged revolutionary upheaval and imperial ambition in France. The stepdaughter of Napoleon Bonaparte and mother of Napoleon III, Hortense died of natural causes on October 5, 1837, at the Château de Arenenberg in Switzerland, having lived a life deeply entwined with the political and social currents of her era. Her death reflected both the vulnerabilities of individuals navigating the turbulent Napoleonic period and the broader uncertainties faced by women in positions of prominence within a male-dominated political landscape. Hortense's life was marked by personal and political complexity. As Queen Consort of Holland through her marriage to Louis Bonaparte, she experienced the pressures of royal duty, public scrutiny, and the demands of empire. Her death removed a stabilizing and culturally influential figure from European high society. While not as universally famous as her father-in-law or her son, her passing had immediate resonance among her contemporaries, eliciting reflection on the intersections of family, power, and exile that characterized Napoleonic Europe. She left behind a legacy of refinement, education, and the cultivation of the arts, particularly music, which would influence her son, Napoleon III, and European cultural life more broadly. The death of Hortense de Beauharnais also illustrates the fragility of memory and legacy. While she did not wield political power directly, her influence persisted through the shaping of family dynasties and the education of future leaders. Commemoration through portraits, letters, and memoirs ensured that her contributions were preserved for posterity. Her passing reminds us that mortality affects not only individuals, but also the networks of power and cultural transmission they inhabit. Through art, literature, and historical study, figures like Hortense are immortalized, allowing modern audiences to engage with the complexities of human life, ambition, and familial legacy. Hortense's life and death underscore the enduring human desire to reconcile the inevitability of mortality with the aspiration for influence and remembrance. Her legacy lives on as a lens through which to explore the values, constraints, and cultural dynamics of Napoleonic Europe, showing how memory and commemoration transform ephemeral lives into lasting historical narratives.